So some good news, but volatility in the EU-UK relationship, and of course volatility politically within the UK, is perhaps not a great portent for us.
The United Kingdom has a new Prime Minister. What does it mean for us here in South Africa? Well, joining me to discuss is Hermann Pretorius of the IRR. So Hermann, you are quite the Anglophile. You follow British politics very closely. How did we get to this point where we now have a new Prime Minister in number 10 Downing Street?
Yes, no, I am quite the Anglophile. That explains the sort of William Gladstone bust behind me. I don't think there are many people with that. But that said, we got here essentially by the downfall of Boris Johnson. In the wake of COVID and the cost of living crisis escalating in July this year, 2022, Johnson announced that he has acknowledged that he has lost the support of his parliamentary caucus and, most importantly, his cabinet, and that he would be stepping down after a leadership election by the Conservative Party. And that leadership election started in Parliament, as Conservative leadership elections over the last decade or so do according to the rules. First, the Conservatives in Parliament choose two candidates of their membership in Parliament to go forward to the country, and then the Conservative Party membership, of which there is approximately 170,000, choose between these two candidates. These two candidates were Rishi Sunak until shortly before Johnson's announced resignation speech in front of Downing Street, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Minister of Finance for the British government, and the other candidate was, of course, Liz Truss, the still at time of recording Foreign Secretary of the Johnson government, but shortly to move from her position in the Foreign Office to number 10. The contest has been ugly between Sunak and Truss. It's an interesting juxtaposition. The previous leadership election, well, actually the one before, that brought about Theresa May's leadership of the Conservative Party, was considered to be too truncated, and it didn't test her weaknesses as a candidate enough. And now this time, I think the party veered to the other side, where it might have gone on too long, damaging the party in the political and polling standings.
Okay, well, here we are. What do we know about Liz Truss and her view of the world, and what is her policy agenda?
So she comes to the position of Prime Minister from the Foreign Office, a brief she hasn't held too long, but a brief that she has held during a time of, unique global political circumstances and geopolitical circumstances, escalating tensions with China and the Ukrainian military conflict there. And on both of those, she can't be considered to be a dove on foreign policy. She prefers to take a more aggressive stance. While she campaigned as a Remainer in the 2016 election, she has endorsed Brexit and has almost taken on with gusto this idea of Britain reasserting itself as the soft power influencer that it could be outside of the EU. We saw the conflict, some would say it an embarrassment of PR proportions, between her and the Soviet Foreign Minister Lavrov, where he stormed out, and the idea was very much to demean her, and depending on who you talk to, you would see, he either succeeded or she held her dignity. She promised not to necessarily campaign on foreign issues, or not to necessarily make this a foreign issue-led prime ministership. While that is a big part of her offering, her key focus was on the cost of living crisis that's currently gripping the world, and of course the UK in a unique way. And that consisted, her offering, mostly of tax cuts based on favorable borrowing circumstances, and then the notion of reviewing the mandate of the Bank of England, something of a contentious point, and there are severe risks policy-wise for both of these in terms of macroeconomic movement.
Yeah, and in many ways, foreign affairs and what's happening in the domestic economy are very much intertwined, because fuel prices, energy costs are going through the roof, primarily because of that conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And I saw you made a bit of a Freudian slip there, Hermann. You referred to Lavrov as the Soviet foreign minister, but times have changed, but they also haven't.
Yes, no, apologies. With Gorbachev's death, I think I've been reading a bit too much about that era.
So let's talk about some of the challenges that Liz Truss is going to face as she comes into office. She's now one of a series of prime ministers. Tories seem to be struggling to keep people in number 10. What headwinds do you think she's going to face, and do you think she's going to be forced to call an early election like some of her predecessors did?
I think, firstly, the nature of the revolving, in-out-door of the Conservative Party is one of her first challenges. We already know of Boris Johnsonites who 12 of them intend to submit letters of no confidence to the 1922 committee, the committee that is essentially responsible for managing party leadership elections from the backbenchers in Parliament. So we know that there is some significant unhappiness at the way Boris Johnson was removed from office. He still has a few key loyalists in the front bench stakes currently. Up to now, Johnson and Truss's interests have been sort of in line. Johnson considered Sunak's resignation a great betrayal and the catalyst for his downfall. But now that Sunak has been seen off, the question is, what does Boris Johnson do now to support or thwart Liz Truss? It'll be a unique situation. While Theresa May, as a former prime minister, is still sitting as a member of the House of Commons, similar to how Ted Heath did after he lost the premiership in the 70s, it has become habit or tradition for prime ministers not to linger too long. Tony Blair didn't linger, Gordon Brown lingered a bit, but then he went. Cameron didn't linger at all, and Theresa May, in a sort of outlier state, is lingering. But Boris Johnson, unlike Theresa May, might linger and have designs on recapturing the premiership, something that Theresa May is very, very unlikely to aspire to. So in a way, Boris Johnson is returning to his natural state of being, perpetually entertaining the question of, will he try to become prime minister? And this time with the little parenthesis of again attached to his name. So that's her first challenge. Second challenge, she's leading a party behind the opposition in the opinion polls with not a necessarily ascendant Keir Starmer, but someone who doesn't scare the voter like a traditional leftist leader like Jeremy Corbyn or Michael Foot in the 80s have done. So that is another challenge she faces. Then the European Union, on the island of Ireland, of course, engaging with some trade tensions with the UK that need to be smoothed out quite elegantly. Otherwise, it might further interrupt trade in that part of the world, significantly affecting South African exporters. And that's not even touching on the severe unhappiness heading into winter in the UK, with an NHS still damaged by COVID and energy prices likely to quadruple in the very short term heading into winter. These are difficult circumstances. I can't think of another premier, perhaps short of Churchill, heading into number 10 amidst World War II, that has faced this type of headwinds on every level.
Yeah, and I'm sure if elections were to be held anytime soon, voters are going to be keenly aware of those price pressures, and energies will be the key focal point of any election. So what does this mean for foreign trade partners such as us here in South Africa? Do we expect any change in terms of foreign policy?
It's sort of a blessing and a curse in an interesting way, one might anticipate. On the elections point, I did not address it. I'm skeptical that she would call an election, but let's see how the next few weeks will play out because of those circumstances of pressures. If she goes to the country now, the risk of punishment is severe. If she goes to the country after 2 years in office in 2024, the situation might be a bit better. But in terms of what it means for us here, to quote our great late Ian Cruikshanks, what does it mean for us is essentially, on the pro side, there is the situation that as International Trade Secretary, Liz Truss deliberately sought to re-engage with Commonwealth countries as a post-Brexit Britain seeks its position within the global trade network. So that might actually be beneficial to countries like South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, even Zimbabwe, that might want to re-engage with a number 10 with a Commonwealth-focused trade policy. However, I think that would have been better for us had the other headwinds not also been pummeling the number 10 ship at this stage. So yes, there are reasons to hope, but the problem, of course, is the EU is a massive trade partner to South Africa, and anything that leads the EU to be perhaps more protectionist, more sensitive to its trade barriers might heighten the difficulty for South African exporters. And if the EU is in a trade war or a low-key trade conflict with the UK, it is always a problem for getting our goods to that market. So some good news, but volatility in the EU-UK relationship, and of course volatility politically within the UK, is perhaps not a great portent for us.
Hermann Pretorius, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. What do you make of Britain's new Prime Minister? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Also, a quick notice that we at the CRA will be hosting a client webinar this Thursday with Ian Cameron of Action Society to discuss South Africa's ongoing violent crime problem. There is a link in the description below where you can find out more information. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.